Why would an NFL team draft a quarterback only to throw him into a game with 0 practice reps, no first-team chemistry, and cameras from every angle tracking his every move? That's exactly what happened to Shedeur Sanders. And depending on who you ask, it wasn't a mistake. It was a setup. From the moment he walked into the league, the media wasn't talking about his passing game or pocket presence. They were focused on his entourage, his fashion, his last name, anything but his ability to play. And when he finally got his moment under the lights, let's just say the reaction was a lot louder and uglier than most expected. 11 practices, 0 first-team snaps, 4th on the depth chart. Then suddenly, he's a starter? On paper, it looked like a bold opportunity. But to some analysts, and even former players, but here's the twist. Instead of breaking under pressure, Shedeur Sanders delivered a performance that exposed the system. His game film didn't just silence critics, it had NFL veterans and media giants rethinking everything they said about him. Within hours, viral social clips, hot takes, and bold accusations began flooding in. Some say the NFL missed out on a once-in-a-generation talent. Others claim he was a media stunt from the start. But whatever side you're on, what happened that night changed the conversation permanently. And the deeper you look into how it all unfolded, from the draft day politics to the old-school bias that still infects the league, the more it starts to look like Shedeur wasn't just underestimated. He was never supposed to win in the first place. Let's break down. Shedeur Sanders wasn't eased into the NFL like most quarterbacks. He didn't have a veteran mentor holding a clipboard next to him. He didn't get preseason backup reps to learn the system gradually. No, this wasn't some planned development arc. Shedeur was tossed straight into the fire without warning. Let's break this down. In total, he had just 11 practices with the team. That's not speculation, that's publicly confirmed. And across all those reps, he didn't take a single snap with the first-team offense. He wasn't prepping with the starters. He wasn't building chemistry with the primary receivers. No one was game planning around his strengths. Yet someone decided he should suddenly be the starter. Let that sink in for a second. No NFL franchise hands the keys to a rookie quarterback, especially one drafted in the 5th. It doesn't matter how talented you are. Without those early reps, you're being set up to fail. And when the backlash began, things got even murkier. Coaches claimed it wasn't their call. The GM, when asked for clarity, said it was a staff decision. But eyebrows really started raising when the owner, Jimmy Haslam, came forward and essentially said, "I had nothing to do with that pick." Publicly, on record. He disowned the move almost instantly. Think about that. The man who cut a $230 million guaranteed check for Deshaun Watson, one of the most controversial moves in NFL history, suddenly wants to play innocent over a 5th-round quarterback selection. Why? Was Shedeur picked as a calculated distraction? A name with publicity value? Guaranteed to draw cameras and spark conversation? Some in the NFL community believe exactly. Commentators like Stephen A. Smith didn't hold back. He went on national television and said what most fans were already thinking. "You're throwing him to the wolves. That's not development, that's sabotage." He's not alone. Multiple analysts have echoed the same suspicion, that Shedeur wasn't drafted for the long term. He was thrown into chaos to create attention, even if it meant breaking him early. Now, to be fair, no one's directly accused the Browns coaching staff or front office of deliberately plotting against him. But it's pretty clear that Shedeur entered the NFL under one of the worst possible scenarios a rookie QB can face. No reps, no support, and immense pressure to perform instantly, with the whole internet watching. If that doesn't sound suspicious, then consider this. Why was the media already framed? Why were reporters asking coded, passive-aggressive questions about his confidence, about his father, or about his entourage? He hadn't even taken the field, and his image was already under attack. Most 5th-round quarterbacks come in quietly through the back door. Shedeur came through the front with everyone's eyes fixed on him, not to cheer him on, but to see if he'd fall flat on his face. There's one more layer here that makes it harder to ignore: the difference in how other QBs are treated. Players like Brock Purdy, taken in the 7th round, were given patience, protection, and time. Shedeur, he got primetime lights and a national audience with no lifeline. Think that's just random? Nah, this wasn't just about talent. This was about the pressures of playing for Deion Sanders' son, being a bold, black quarterback who carries swagger, speaks confidently, and refuses to play quiet. To some institutions, especially traditional NFL power structures, that confidence is threatening. But Shedeur didn't break. He didn't even blink. And what happened next on the field would flip the entire script. Because despite every disadvantage, every setup, and every hand stacked against him, Shedeur walked into his debut and stole the entire spotlight. Before Shedeur Sanders ever threw a pass in the NFL, the media was already whispering loud. What they weren't praising his accuracy, his poise, or the fact that he dominated at the college level. Instead, they zeroed in on his entourage, his watch, his name, his confidence, his father, not the game. The moment he stepped on the field, reporters were already framing. News outlets posted blurry sideline clips of him walking out for warm-ups, not with commentary on his throws, but with a sarcastic tone about how many people escorted him. "Look at him bringing a whole crew," one analyst laughed. "He hasn't even played yet." Forget the film. They wanted a narrative. Now compare this to other rookie quarterbacks. When a top-pick white QB walks into the building with confidence, he's framed as a natural leader. When Shedeur shows the same energy, he's a showboat. And when he shows up looking like a star, suddenly it's arrogance. That double standard speaks volumes, and Shedeur wasn't naive to it. One press conference stands out. A reporter casually asked an intentionally vague question about whether he feels like he deserves to be here. It wasn't disguised well. It carried the weight of doubt. Shedeur didn't flinch. He calmly responded about life, faith, and perseverance, saying, "God's patient with us. I haven't gone through this kind of situation before. But I feel like it's a test of character, a test of how I respond. No arrogance, no anger, just clarity, grace, maturity." The problem? That clip didn't go viral because of what he said. It was cut, twisted, and posted with mocking captions. This guy thinks God called him to the NFL. Others made it worse, stripping context entirely just to boost clicks, as if being thoughtful disqualified him from leading an offense. But it wasn't just the pressers. This narrative started building way earlier, back in college. And the source? You guessed it. His last name, being Deion Sanders' son, meant Shedeur had already been labeled privileged, cocky, or protected, even though his numbers were objectively elite. Let's not sugarcoat it. Some people just didn't like that Shedeur came into the league with a name already louder than his stats. But here's the thing. That name, that pressure, it wasn't a gift. It was another target on his back. Need proof? After his debut, when he outplayed expectations, ESPN segments didn't open with "Rookie Shocks League" or "QB shines under pressure." Instead, they flooded panels with passive takes like, "Let's not overreact," and "He looked okay." But can he be consistent? Bro, the guy had no NFL snaps, no support system. 5th round pick, threw a touchdown, ran for first downs, put on a clinic under pressure. And your first take is caution? Let it sink in. A 21-year-old came into the pros with the weight of a country, but not everyone bought into the BS. Fans started paying attention. Clips from analysts who actually studied the tape started surfacing. They showed how Shedeur read coverages like a seasoned pro and executed under fire. The backlash to the media narrative came fast. especially on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. People were done with the biased headlines. Then, slowly, the conversation began to turn, because it was clear this wasn't just about football. This was about image, about control, about the invisible line between what the league wants in a quarterback and what makes them uncomfortable. Yes, Shedeur wore the watch. Yes, he carried himself like a star before he'd taken a snap. But then, he backed it up. And when a player backs it up, no matter how many headlines try to up next, you'll see what really made that happen. Because the game tape doesn't lie. And what Shedeur did in that debut, it wasn't just personal. It was surgical. While some critics were focused on Shedeur's wristwatch, what fans started noticing, slowly, then all at once, was far more valuable. His football IQ. Shedeur didn't just make a few flashy plays in his NFL debut. He put on a clinic in decision-making, defensive reading, and situational awareness. The kind you usually only see from veterans with playoff scars. And that's not hyperbole. Let's break it down. It's 3rd and 9, pressure situation. 5 defenders line up for a blitz. Most rookies would panic, maybe rush a throw or take a sack. But Shedeur? Instead of forcing a pass, he instantly shifts into escape mode, burns the defenders with his legs, and picks up the crucial first down. No hesitation, no wasted movement. He even slides smartly to protect himself at the end of the play. That's not just athleticism, that's field IQ. That's a pattern recognition skill most guys don't master until year 2 or 3, if ever. He made it look effortless, but it gets better. Next drive, the Browns defense switches it up. This time, it's a pattern match zone, a more complex look. The kind of scheme that can bait rookie quarterbacks into throwing picks. But Shedeur spots it right away. He identifies the adjustment seconds before the snap. One of the defenders is backpedaling just enough to suggest he'll drop. He puts the ball right between 2 defenders, within inches of a fully stretched diving DB, landing safely in the hands of his receiver. Pinpoint perfect. Not just a good throw, the kind of throw that proves you belong. Analysts watching that clip didn't even have time to react before Twitter X ran it hundreds of thousands of views deep. Mostly under captions like, "This ain't a 5th-round QB. This is a starter." And once again, he showed it wasn't luck. Throughout the game, cameras captured Shedeur doing something that silenced casual critics. Eyes locked downfield the entire time. Even when pressured, even as defenders break through, he doesn't look at the rush. He reads coverages. He scans progressions. He holds safeties with his eyes. He directs receivers mid-play with subtle hand signals. That's processor. It's something scouts can't always measure. It only shows up in real time with real pressure, when fans are loud and critics are louder. And that's exactly when he shines. One of the most talked about sequences from his debut, the extended scramble that caught even seasoned defensive backs looking the wrong way. Shedeur moves out of the pocket, keeps his eyes downfield the entire way, never panics. Then, with pressure coming straight into its face, he makes a subtle point with his left hand, directing his receiver mid-play. And milliseconds later, bang! Ball out, right on target. Defender can't react. Touchdown. Crowd goes crazy. This play wasn't just technically sharp, it was statement-level difficult. Most rookies don't even think to communicate mid-scramble. Shedeur did it without hesitation. At this point, even die-hard skeptic, because what you were watching wasn't cockiness, and it wasn't luck. It was total control. Even Skip Bayless, one of the most cynical voices in sports media, said it best. Shedeur Sanders made 143 NFL teams look like fools tonight. Because he didn't just handle the pressure, he embarrassed the scouts who overlooked him. And he's right. The stats didn't fully tell the story. His calm demeanor in the pocket, his ability to adapt mid-play, his calculated aggression when it mattered most. These weren't instincts, they were fundamentals. And the best part, the game didn't feel like a peak. It felt like a preview. After that performance, you couldn't find a highlight channel that wasn't breaking down his first game like it was Week 16 playoff tape. And the closer you look, the more obvious it becomes. Shedeur Sanders didn't just prove he belonged, he made it clear. He's already ahead of the curve. After Shedeur Sanders' debut, fans were expecting a media frenzy. Highlight loops, praise segments, maybe even way too early starter discussions. Instead, crickets. Sure, the highlight shows couldn't completely ignore it. The film was too viral, the clips were too clean, but instead of celebrating what would have been hailed as a miracle game for any other rookie QB, most talking heads around the league opted for cautious deflection. Nice performance, but let's not overhype it. Small sample size. Needs to play like this consistently before we start talking starter. Sound familiar? You didn't hear that when Zach Wilson threw for 218 yards and 1 touchdown in his first game. When other rookie QBs flash, the headlines read, "Next franchise QB." When Shedeur does it, the tone shifts to suspicion. But here's the kicker. He wasn't supposed to do that. He fell to 144th in the NFL draft, a player who, by the metrics, outperformed nearly every quarterback in his class during college, dropped to the 5th round, while teams spent 2nd and 3rd round picks on players with weaker resumes, simply because his background didn't fit the narrative. The stat lines don't lie. The game film doesn't lie. But the silence? That says even more. Some fans say this was the league's worst-case scenario. They took Shedeur thinking they were getting noise, headlines, and maybe some preseason hype, not a real threat to their depth chart. And now, they're embarrassed. Because 143 teams looked at Shedeur and said no. They passed on game tape, passed on production, passed on performance, passed on proof, all because the perception didn't match the profile they were comfortable with. It gets even deeper. Let's talk about Cleveland, the team that finally took him. Many believe they didn't even do it as a football move. Like Skip Bayless said on live TV, the Browns owner Jimmy Haslam just wanted a little more attention. That tracks. The Browns didn't exactly announce the pick like they snagged a sleeper superstar. There were no press releases bragging about getting value at QB. No post-draft comments about what made Shedeur stand out. In fact, Haslam tried to distance himself from the pick entirely, saying days after, "That wasn't me. That was the GM and the staff." Really? You greenlight one of the most controversial QB signings in league history? A $230 million guaranteed deal for Deshaun Watson. But suddenly, when it comes to a day 3 rookie QB, you play the ghost? It's not hard to see what's going on here. The Browns didn't expect maybe merch sales, but actually challenging the depth chart, actually putting pressure on their multi-million-dollar investment, they weren't ready for that. And let's be honest, the league wasn't either. That's probably why so many insiders went quiet. Because what do you say when a player you refuse to acknowledge goes out and validates every single thing his biggest believers have been saying for years? Here's what made it worse for them. Players noticed. Former pros started reposting his clips. High-level QB coaches broke down his poise like they were watching an all-22 of a 5-year veteran. Even neutral analysts, no ties to Dion, no background bias, started using the word steal. Public opinion flipped within 24 hours. And yet, the league's official social pages? Silent. No spotlight. No behind-the-scenes feature, just recycled coverage and surface-level treatment, like it all didn't just happen. But it did, and it exposed something that goes way beyond football. It proved that the NFL doesn't just miss on talent. Sometimes it willfully ignores it when it doesn't come in the right package. When it's too flashy, too black, too confident. When it brings baggage, even if that so-called baggage is Deion Sanders. What they didn't want to say out loud, what fans began screaming across comment sections and Twitter threads, was simple. Y'all tried to bury him, and he forced your hand. They couldn't silence the stats, couldn't hide the highlight tape, couldn't scrub the plays that trended on every platform within minutes. He didn't just show up and play, he put the league on blast. Because here's what people started realizing. If Shedeur Sanders keeps playing like this, if he keeps demanding the spotlight not with his name, but with his command of the field, then the league isn't just going to have to find a spot for him on the depth chart. They're going to have to rewrite the scouting book they used to overlook him in the first place. If the NFL tried to look away, the internet refused to let Shedeur Sanders be ignored. Within hours of his debut, social media exploded. Highlight breakdowns, fan edits, split-screen comparisons with other rookie QBs, and just as importantly, outrage. Outrage from fans who saw exactly what was happening and refused to let it slide. Forget ESPN's neutral tone. Twitter/X was on fire. Why didn't this guy go in the first round? Remind me again who got picked ahead of this man? Shedeur just played better than half the starters in the league. And while platforms like ESPN and the NFL Network kept the volume low, Independent turned it all the way up. YouTubers were cutting film within the first 12 hours, slowing down footage, pointing out how Shedeur manipulated defensive backs with his eye movement, rolled out against pressure and delivered on-the-money throws that rookies weren't supposed to be able to make. Creators started calling his debut the most slept-on rookie performance in years. Meanwhile, on TikTok, the culture was already celebrating. Clips of his flashy touchdown throw, paired with audio edits like "He is him" and "The league messed up," passed 1 million views within 36 hours. Users weren't just watching, they were rallying, laughing at the analysts who doubted him, dragging the scouts who passed him up, and clowning the media personalities who suddenly went silent. One tweet, with over 250,000 likes, said it best. The league didn't want Shedeur to succeed, but the moment he touched the field, it wasn't just hype. It was cultural momentum, beyond stats, beyond the game itself. This was a case of public reality versus curated narrative. And the public? They weren't buying the sanitized media response. People remembered that just a week earlier, the mainstream story around Shedeur was about his entourage, his flash, and whether he was too confident. The same voices questioning if he could handle the pressure were nowhere to be found when he thrived under it. Even NFL veterans joined the conversation. Former players and coaches posted clips praising his footwork, poise, and pre-snap reads. One former scout simply tweeted, "This dude got a day 1 starter brain in a day 3 draft slot." That's when the energy shifted. What started as fan outrage evolved into real football respect. With major outlets as if to downplay what fans already knew, he was ready the whole time. Every QB analyst worth their film library was now posting breakdowns, not out of hype, but necessity. Because the receipts weren't just social, they were technical. Shedeur's completion percentage under pressure, his adjustments at the line, his ability to extend plays without getting reckless, it all lined up with franchise-level traits. If you stripped the name and just showed the footage, you'd think you were watching a seasoned starter, not a 5th-round rookie with the media painting him as a personality pick. But there's a deeper reason why this reactive support mattered. Shedeur represented more than just a good game. He symbolized the clash between old football gatekeeping and new wave expectation. He was loud, unapologetic, confident, black, and born of NFL royalty. Yet they still wanted to strip him of his dignity and call it development. They wanted the flash without the competence. Problem is, he delivered both. Suddenly, the cocky narrative didn't stick. The idea that he was just a brand with a last name couldn't hold up against throws that split double coverage and escapes from collapsing pockets with surgical clarity. Even the "he wasn't ready" narrative couldn't survive, because now fans had the visual proof, the stats, and the context to fight back, and they did. Hard. This entire wave of social support, from meme pages to independent film analysts to casual fans, became the one thing the league never... Do you understand why Shedeur Sanders is treated the way he is? Why every move he makes is dissected differently than other rookie QBs? You have to look at the name on the back of his jersey, Sanders. That name doesn't just come with hype, it comes with heat. And no one knows that better than Shedeur himself. He's not just any young quarterback trying to make the league. He's the son of Deion Sanders, arguably the greatest cornerback of all time, a two-sport Hall of Famer, and one of the most polarizing figures the game has ever seen. Flashy, loud, unapologetic, primetime. And as much as fans love Deion, the league never fully embraced him. Not while he was dominant, not even when he was changing the culture. He was too bold, too confident, too comfortable in his skin. Sound familiar? That's exactly the blueprint Shedeur stepped into, whether he wanted to or not. The pressure to live up to a father like Deion alone would have been enough to break most young players. But Shedeur wasn't just expected to be good. He was expected to live up to a legend, to carry a brand, and simultaneously avoid being seen as a Nepo QB. And it gets even more complicated. The moment he stepped on the field, critics were already waiting to call him privileged. They ignored the 70% completion season at Jackson State. They downplayed his transfer success at Colorado. They scoffed at his stats, claiming it's different in the NFL. The truth? They couldn't handle the idea of a quarterback who wore a chain and a Rolex and still had elite poise in the pocket. Because let's be honest, the NFL has traditionally celebrated quarterbacks who act humble, almost grateful to be there. Shedeur came in built different. He didn't ask the league for permission. He acted like he belonged from day one. He didn't try to shrink himself to fit the room. And once again, that confidence unnerved the system in the same way Deion's swagger did decades before. It's almost poetic. Back when Deion entered the NFL, he was doubted from the start, told he was more athlete than football player, more entertainer than team guy. Sound familiar? Shedeur's getting the same treatment. The only difference now is that social media exists to call it out in real time. Let's not forget, Deion made it to the Hall of Fame despite the criticism. Shedeur's challenge? He's trying to carve his path while already being trapped beneath the weight of expectations set before he was even born. Because when you're Deion's son, doing well isn't enough. You have to be perfect. And when Shedeur makes a solid throw, the conversation isn't he played well. It's he's not his dad, or that's what he's supposed to do with that last name. But here's the most impressive part of it all. He never uses Deion as a shield, not in interviews, not in tweets, not when the media tries to bait him. Shedeur carries himself as his own man. He speaks with focus. When the press tries to wedge his father into every answer, he responds with respect but doesn't deflect accountability. No excuses, no finger pointing. That's not privilege, that's maturity. And Deion, he plays his role too. Say what you want about how loud Coach Prime is as a persona, but as a father, he's done one thing right from day one. Let Shedeur take the heat. He doesn't lobby the league to treat his son special. He doesn't make excuses when critics pile on. Instead, he stands back and says, let him show you. And Shedeur has. So when you zoom out and realize the stakes, a legacy kid under a microscope, laughed at during the draft, placed behind veterans with less raw skill, surrounded by media trying to turn him into content, and still, he walks into his debut, shows leadership, poise, and football IQ. That's pressure most QBs will never understand. It's legacy without a safety net. And yet somehow, still, he looks more focused than rattled, more calculated than flashy. And with each snap, he earns not just his last name, but something far more important, his own identity. Shedeur isn't trying to be primetime. He's just trying to be prime in his own way. And if that DNA is any indication, he's just getting started. By now, it should be obvious. Shedeur Sanders didn't just show up to play football. He showed up and changed the entire conversation. This wasn't about one good performance. It wasn't just about statistics, reactions, or even narratives. This was bigger, because Shedeur didn't just prove people wrong. He exposed how entire systems see athletes like him. A fifth-round pick isn't supposed to walk into the spotlight and outplay expectations and the scouting department. He's supposed to serve time on the bench, get sidelined by irrelevant press, then maybe, years down the road, come up for a contract if he's lucky. Instead, Shedeur came in like a glitch in the system, poised, prepared, unbothered. And that shook people. Because if he succeeds, it forces the media, the league, the NFL front offices, and yes, even fans, to ask uncomfortable questions. Why was he ignored on draft night? Why did coverage focus on his personality instead of his performance? Why was he judged more harshly than players with far less talent? Shedeur was never behind because of skill. He was behind because of bias. The flash, the confidence, the name, the refusal to play humble when he'd already earned the right to stand tall. That's what threatened the status quo. Let's be clear. The NFL doesn't have a quarterback problem. It has a narrative problem. It claims to love talent, yet often picks polish over production. It talks about development, but stifles confidence when it doesn't come wrapped in safe packaging. It says it's evolving, but still treats legacy-driven, outspoken athletes as distractions rather than dynasties. Shedeur flipped all of that on its head in one night. And maybe that's why people are still trying to figure out how to talk about him, because he disrupted the script they had prepared. He didn't beg for the spotlight, but he didn't shy away from it either. When they tried to call him Dion's son, he made sure you knew he was also Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback. That's the real game changer. He didn't just want approval. He demanded acknowledgement and earned it. Not through drama, not through viral antics, through football. Nothing more, nothing less. And that scares people more than they'll admit. Because if Shedeur keeps this up, he doesn't just rise in the league. He proves that the entire system of how we value black quarterbacks, sons of stars, and independent-minded players is broken. He shows that guys who don't fit into the NFL's polite little molds aren't risky. They're just real, raw, loud, honest, and dangerous once you realize the game was built to push them aside. But here's the twist, and maybe the best part of all. Shedeur doesn't care what they think. He's not chasing their headlines. He's not playing to be QB1 on some early depth chart power rankings. He's doing exactly what his father did, shifting culture by performing so well, you're forced to tell the truth. People laughed when Dion said he's him. They called it branding, ego, hype. But now, the tape is doing the talking. The internet has the receipts. The fans know what they saw. And deep down, so does the league. Shedeur is composed like a vet, thinks like a coordinator, moves like a dual-threat tank, and speaks like a leader. That's not marketing. That's not Prime's kid. That's a NFL quarterback who just hasn't been handed the title yet. Not officially, but unofficially? That moment already passed because Shedeur didn't wait for permission. He rewrote the scouting report. He challenged the hierarchy. He earns his stripes with poise, precision, and patience for the game, not for the nonsense. And that, more than any stat, is why he's dangerous. Because when a fifth-round pick holds the room like a franchise player, the league doesn't just have to update their rankings, they have to rethink their entire system. So here's the question that matters now. Will the NFL evolve in time to catch up with Shedeur Sanders? Or will they cling to old narratives until he breaks through, with or without their help? Either way, one thing's clear. He was never supposed to win. But now that he has your attention, he's not letting go.